Hi, good day and good evening, everyone. I hope you can all hear me, so please let us know. I will appreciate the information from you about the sound, and do you hear us properly? If anybody can let us know, it will be great. I'm Sophie, and I will be your host today, and it's a great pleasure to welcome you all at the next IVF webinars by Egg Donation Friends. Maybe some of you join us for the first time, but we meet here every Tuesday, and we do that for some time now. And surprising as it may sound, today is our 50th webinar. So yeah, we did it 50 times already. And on behalf of our whole team, I'd like to thank you all for your participation so far, your time, and especially trust. And we are not going to stop doing what we do because we believe that sharing is caring. From this place, I'd like to also thank all our partners, Eiselspende and Donor Conception Network. And so we are here together with Nina Barnsley, director of the Donor Conception Network. And the Donor Conception Network is charity founded 25 years ago to help break the isolation felt by so many people using donor-assisted conception methods. And we will talk about donor conception dilemmas, decision-making, family building, and managing differences. The presentation will take around 30 minutes. After the presentation, we will start the Q&A session, and you are welcome to ask your questions, typing them in the chat section, starting even from now, and we will ask those questions after Nina's presentation. From my side, for now, that's all. Nina, are you ready?
I'm ready. Thank you, Sophie.
Hi. So, fingers crossed. Let's do it.
Great. So yes, welcome everybody, and thank you so much to Sophie and Egg Donation Friends for inviting me to speak this evening. I'm going to be talking about donor conception issues, and the title, Exploring Donor Conception to Create or Expand Your Family, is the main heading. So it's mainly aimed at people who haven't had children yet and helping you to think through what it is you need to consider. And I thought of a second title, perhaps a little bit more meaty, talking really about loss. There's a lot of loss often in donor conception stories for parents. There's a journey that often has a lot of grief in it. There's issues around difference, so creating a family in a different way. There's a lot of decision making, you know, how you're going to make all of these complicated decisions that have in some cases a really lifelong impact, and how you can really build confidence in those decisions and in the choices that you're making. So that's what I'm going to be covering today. Okay, so just an overview of the topics. I'm going to have a look at what is donor conception, who uses it, who are the donors, what do you need to consider? So the things that you should be thinking about if you're either decided on this journey or you're right at the beginning and thinking, could this be right for me? And then I'm going to explore a little bit about the feelings and the issues that can come up for people. And as part of that, we will look at openness. So how you can share this story with friends and family and with the child, and do that with confidence. Is it important? We'll have a look at that as well. I'll mention a little bit about how DC Network can help. So our organisation, our charity, has supported donor conception families for over 25 years. So we've got a lot of experience, and there are certain key things that certain resources we've got that help people very often. And then I want to finish by really trying to help you think about what's going to build confidence and help you make those next steps. Okay, so first of all, it's a conversation about, you know, what is donor conception, and because it's a treatment that is often done through a clinic, it is billed as a fertility treatment. But I think it's important to acknowledge that it isn't, strictly speaking, a fertility treatment. So it doesn't solve a fertility issue, but it is a way that you can have a baby and have a family. And the reason I mention that is it just frames it slightly differently, frames the questions and the issues slightly differently. So it's worth considering what do you need to make a baby? So you need sperm, you need eggs, and you need a warm place for the baby to grow. And so in the case of donor conception families, one of those ingredients, or maybe two, maybe even all three, are missing and are being brought in from somebody who is outside the family. By family, I mean just the parents who are going to be raising the child. So it may be a family member even who's donating eggs or donating sperm, but they're not going to be parenting the child. So it makes it different. And it is a different route to parenthood, and that can be really challenging sometimes for people. So it's something that is worth acknowledging and worth exploring and spending some time on. Obviously, this person who is helping, this donor, is another part of the story. So who are they, and how important are they for this journey, this story, and how are you going to make a decision about who to choose? There are important implications. Some of these decisions, like choosing the donor and where to have treatment, will have lifelong implications for the whole of your family. So it is really important to spend time now considering what you need to think about, what's going to make you feel comfortable and confident going forward, and what's going to help you with sharing this story with your child. And of course, it's really important always to acknowledge how you're really feeling about this. And for some people, it is not a comfortable start. I mean, often people can feel uncomfortable to start with, and then that can change. But some people don't get comfortable with it, and maybe it isn't right for them. So just hold that in your head as well, that this might not be the right route for you, and that's okay. So just to recap, who uses donor conception? People can often get very sort of locked into their own situation and assume that they're sort of typical of a donor conception family, but actually anybody might be using donor conception. So we have in our membership, and people seeking treatment at clinics could be heterosexual couples who might be having sperm donation or egg donation. Sometimes they're having double donation or embryo donation. They might be using surrogacy. Same-sex couples will obviously need to use a donor, and so they might be using sperm donation again, egg donation with surrogacy, double donation. And if they're a same-sex lesbian couple, one partner might be donating their eggs to the other, so that one partner is carrying the baby and the other partner is the genetic parent. And all of these have quite complex differences and complex implications. And then, of course, single people. So single men, single women might be having sperm donation or egg donation with surrogacy in the case of single men. So it's a broad range. And then who might the donor be? So they could be a family member, they could be a friend or an acquaintance, someone who you've connected with. It might be someone who you met through a website or through Facebook. And it could be a donor through a clinic, a UK clinic, bearing in mind that anyone through a clinic will be identifiable to a child at the age of 18, and also they will have information about half siblings. And you might be using a donor through a non-UK clinic, and there it will depend on the law of that country and the way that the clinics operate. So the donor might be completely anonymous, or there might be lots of information about the donor, and there might be the potential for contact, but it will vary from country to country and clinic to clinic. So what do you need to consider? I think the first point is to start with where you are now. And some people may already have decided this is definitely the way forward, but they just want to know a bit more. They want to understand what they need to be thinking about, how to make some of these difficult decisions. And other people may be a bit further back on that journey and not be quite sure that this is right for them. So it's important to sort of have that and acknowledge that, and to recognize that if you have a partner, that they may not be at the same stage on the journey as you. So it's possible that you're convinced, you're ready to go, but your partner is less sure. And it might be the other way around, of course. And it is important, if you're a couple, that you give yourselves time to catch up with each other, to make sure that you're moving forward at the right pace. And that can be very frustrating sometimes, particularly for the one who's decided. If one person's decided they're definitely sure they want to go forward, the other partner is perhaps a bit more hesitant, has some reservations. But this has got to be a joint decision, and both people have to be comfortable with it. For single people, there can be different issues, so it can feel like quite a lonely journey. You're having to make all these decisions on your own. You've got to work out whether you're going to manage raising a child on your own. Have you got the resources? And it's important to start thinking about that. So building some kind of a network around you, and bringing in people who can help share that process and share those difficult times. I think the other thing to start off with when you're considering what to focus on is that for most people, this is a journey of letting go of a child that they can't have. So for heterosexual couples, very often this is not the way that people have planned to have their children. Sometimes it might be. There may have been a medical condition that means that a person always knew that they were going to need to use donor conception. But for most people, it's not the first port of call. And so there can be a process of saying, okay, the child that I'd dreamed of is not the child that I'm going to have. And that letting go process will hopefully allow you to start to think about the child that you could have. And that will be a different child, and it's a different way of having that child. But it's two sort of separate journeys that can go on in tandem to some degree. And I think that process of letting go of the child that can't be, thinking about the child that can be, is a helpful part of working out whether this option is going to be right for you or not. So there are then some more practical things to consider. So you'll need to decide where you're going to have treatment. As I said, different countries have different laws, different clinics have different protocols. So it is worth really thinking about what's important to you and making sure that you end up at a place that's going to be able to give you what you need. It's also worth thinking that your child is going to have needs of their own, and you don't know what those will be. You don't know whether this child will have curiosity about their donor or no curiosity about their donor, might be curious about half siblings, might be completely disinterested. And so it's just worth just holding their views in mind as you're making these decisions and thinking, this baby is going to turn into a toddler, into a teenager, into an adult, and they want to be able to feel proud of where they've come from, of their family story, and you want to feel proud of that story too. And part of that will be rooted in the decisions that you make now. Choosing the donor. So how much information do you need? Some people want very little information. They would rather just treat this as a distant person who doesn't have too many details for them to have to pick through, and they don't want to see it as shopping and having to go through different options and choose somebody particular. Other people very much want detail. They want to know exactly who this person is. They want to feel a connection to the person to be able to bring them into their family story. And so it's worth thinking for you what's going to be important. And if you're using other kinds of donors, so donors that you've met maybe through the internet, or if you've got a known donor, maybe a family member is a donor, it is really, really important to think about the boundaries for that relationship and make sure intentions on both sides are clear. We would always recommend you get some kind of document written up, ideally with a lawyer, to clarify and set down each side's intentions, their rights and responsibilities and plans, so that at least you've got a record of what's been agreed. You might want to think, is there going to be a possibility of future contact with the donor for the child? And will there be information about half siblings and possible contact again? And then if not, or if there is, you want to be able to manage the expectations of that, who this person is, and make sure that you're comfortable with that. So on another practical level, there's emotional energy and there's resources, so time and money and the kind of support network that you have around you. And all of this is really important and will determine to some degree how much energy you're going to have to put into this process. And it's worth thinking about that. Because it can be a very grueling process for some people, and it can go on for a long time, and you want to make sure that you've got that support and you know what resources you have in the background. And then the other issues are around telling. So it is worth, even at this early stage, thinking about who you might be willing to share this information with to get that support, and how you might do that, how you might explain this to a very close friend or close family member. There's no pressure, you don't have to tell anybody, and some people would rather keep it private certainly until perhaps they know that they're pregnant or they know they've had a baby. Other people will want to bring people into the conversation early on to get that support, but at some point it is probably going to be a topic that's going to come up where you'll need to be thinking about telling your child and possibly telling a few other people. And so again, it's helpful to at least start that process, thinking about that process at this stage, because you want to be all the things kind of fit together. So choosing the donor, where you're having treatment, what kind of resources you need to be able to see you through this process, all of which are connected with the story that you're going to tell about this family building exercise that you're on. And so it's not that you have to do everything right at the beginning, but it's worth just planting a few of those seeds. And of course, how are you going to make all these decisions, and where are you going to get the support from, which is hopefully one of the things that I can talk about, what DC Network can help with, but also your wider community. And just to finish, because a lot of what I've talked about maybe feels negative or difficult, very challenging, just to put it in there as a question, does it all need to be perfect? You know, I don't think it does. It needs to be good enough that you feel comfortable with the choices that you're making and the decisions that you're taking. And there isn't any such thing as a perfect family. It's about what you're going to make it, and making sure that that you're happy with what you're doing, and that there are no unresolved issues in the background or niggling doubts. You want to get those out now, and at least put them on the table to talk about them. It certainly doesn't need to be perfect. So what feelings can come up for people? I think the main one that comes up is a grief over that loss of a genetic connection. For some people that's hugely important, for other people it may be less important, but for most people they will have assumed that they're going to have a child that they're genetically connected to. Now, of course, it may be that you are going to be genetically connected to your child, because it may be that you're a single person just using donor sperm or donor egg with surrogacy. But it may be that your child is going to be genetically connected to somebody outside of the family. And so it's thinking about, well, who is that person, and a sort of sense of grief over the connection that your child will have to somebody outside of the family, sort of feeling a sense of loss. They can feel a sense of not being a real dad, not being a real mum, if you haven't actually contributed the sperm or the eggs, and that can be a feeling that comes up for people. It can be a sense of fear over bonding. Will I connect with this child? Will they feel like mine? And obviously fears about telling. A lot of people are anxious about sharing this information. There are issues around privacy, which we're huge respecters of privacy, but there is a boundary between privacy and secrecy, and so it's getting that boundary right, so that you can preserve the privacy of the family, but without it being a secret that has an element of shame around it. But that fear is very common and very understandable. And of course, most people don't really want to talk about this. This is not a topic that's bright and light and jolly. This is a difficult topic, and it can be hugely emotional. And so it's very common, again, not to want to share it too widely, not wanting to acknowledge it publicly. And of course, there can be some anxieties around the donor. Who is this person and what's their impact going to be on the family? There are a few other practical issues that can come up. There will be issues around medical questions. So if you're using a donor, then you may not be able to answer all the medical questions asked about your child, and that can be quite difficult sometimes. It may be that if you're on your own, that you hadn't expected to do it on your own. You were really hoping to do it with a partner, and again, that's very common. If you're a lesbian couple and perhaps one of you is carrying the baby, you may feel that you're not the real mum because you haven't carried the baby, and it can be a difficult decision sometimes in couples to decide who's going to do that, and that can be tricky sometimes to navigate. And of course, I do want to stress there can also be the simple joy, the wonderful excitement that actually there is a way to have a baby. For most people who come to donor conception, this is a this is a gift of an opportunity in some ways. You know, in another era, another time, this option would not have been available, and so it's exciting that it is. So I'm going to talk a little bit about openness because it is quite important, and I'm just going to give some thoughts. I'm just going to plant some seeds here to think about why openness is important. I think the main roots of this are that really secrets are not a good basis for family life. You're trying to create a family where you want the environment to be warm and open and loving, and it is difficult to manage that when there is something at the heart of the family, some important piece of information that isn't talked about and isn't shared. I think there is an issue of respect. You know, donor conceived people, I think they do have they deserve to know the truth. We want them to understand that they were made in a different way, which can explain all sorts of things around medical history, around looks being different, talents, etc. On that topic, it is actually harder to keep the secret than you might think. So a lot of people think, well, I just won't tell anybody, and that's fair enough. But once they're confronted with perhaps the GP surgery asking them to complete a form about their child's medical background, and they're knowing that they are filling incorrect and misleading information, if they're at family gatherings where people are constantly talking about looks, oh, where does she get her curly hair from? And oh, she doesn't look like you, does she? That it can be really actually very difficult to keep that secret and not feel that you're actually actively lying. So people very often think, well, I just won't tell. It'll be a sort of something that we just don't need to talk about. And very quickly that can slip into actively saying things that are not true. And that can feel very uncomfortable for people. And often it's at that point they think, oh, maybe I should be open. And maybe, in fact, being open would be easier. The research all supports telling young that there seems to be a lot of evidence that it's early days and there hasn't been a lot of research done, but children can absorb this information early on and it becomes part of who they are, it becomes part of their identity. And the one thing that we certainly know is that for the people who find out by accident and they find out later in life, it can be very difficult to then integrate that story into their sense of who they are. And there can be a feeling of been lied to. Can I trust my parents again? What else have my parents lied to me about? And so that accidental disclosure is really important to avoid, and which is where being open comes in. And just as a final thought, DNA testing. The advent of the home DNA testing kit is outing all sorts of secrets in families, including donor conception issues. So I think the chance of a child conceived now not discovering that they are not genetically connected to their parent, or they are genetically connected to people outside of who they consider their family, you're not going to be able to hold this secret. And so again, it's worth starting this journey when they're young. So even if your donor is anonymous, it's important to tell. Sometimes people think, well, I've got nothing to tell. I don't know who this donor is. But I think the issues that I just raised around honesty are still relevant. I think it helps to give an explanation of why there might be differences in looks or temperament or talents, and it gives an accurate medical history, and that's quite important. And like I said, the DNA testing means that even if the donor is anonymous, the chance of a child not discovering the fact of donor conception is very small, even if they can't find their donor. So it can feel enormously daunting, and that can be for many reasons. So one of the reasons being open can feel so scary is that there's often some embarrassment. There might be shame around fertility issues, shame around having had to use donor conception. It's a private issue, so people can sometimes think, well, why do other people have to know? And that goes back to what we were just talking about before. There might be a feeling that friends or family might judge me, judge us. There may be a sense of, okay, in theory, I'd like to be open, but I really have no idea how I'm going to do it. How am I going to start? What words should I use? And again, what's the point in being open if we've been abroad, we've used an anonymous donor, and there's nothing to tell? Isn't that just going to cause more problems? But I think Dominic, who's one of our members who used sperm donation, really summed it all up in this little quote. And he said to us, before our daughter was born, it was all about me and how unfair it was that I couldn't have my own genetic child. But now she's here, I see that it's all about her. And because I love her so much, I want to be honest with her about how she began. And I think that's a journey that a lot of people go on. So they may start off thinking, well, I won't tell, nobody needs to know. And then when the baby arrives, this precious little thing actually changes everything, and it becomes more about them. And so yes, we acknowledge that it is actually very difficult for lots of people to be open. It's not an easy path. There's lots of support available. I'm going to come on to some of the things that can help, but it is important to consider. So to build confidence for you in this this process, I would just say that, from a child's point of view, this is not bad news. This is just information. It's just the truth. Parents can often assume that telling the child is going to be damaging or upsetting because they're seeing it as bad news, but it isn't bad news. It's just the truth, the facts of how a child was conceived. And I think the what we emphasize a lot is in parents becoming really confident and comfortable in the story before they start telling anybody else, before they start talking with their child. And that can take a long time sometimes for some people. But once you've got a confidence, once you've built up that sense of, okay, this is just a story that of how the family came to be, and it's okay, I can do this. That also is part of the message that comes across to the child. They hear that this is just a piece of information. This isn't something upsetting. This isn't something terrible. And so, really, the key is to a large degree how you tell, and that comes down to your confidence and your ability to get comfortable with this. So just a quick check-in to what we can offer. I'm not going to do a big sales job, but our charity, which was founded over 25 years ago, I say that just to say we have a lot of experience. Some of the early families, those children are now adults having children of their own. So we've really seen a wide and long spectrum of family life and DC adults, donor conceived adults. We were founded on principles of honesty and openness, and we have a large support network in the UK and not just in the UK. And we mainly offer peer-to-peer support, helping people around the social and emotional issues of donor conception. And we would say we're, from the very beginning, we're there for the whole family, and we're there for the long view. So that's a quick snap of our website. Do go and have a look at that if you get a chance. There's loads of information on there, lots of personal stories, lots of sort of thoughts and reflections on different issues around decision making, on talking with children. And we have wonderful resources. So we've got books for children, the Our Story range, and we have a book for pretty much every family. We have the telling and talking books, which help support people in talking to children, talking to friends and family, talking to the wider community. And we have that broken into age ranges. We have workshops, so we run preparation workshops for people before they have children, and we have telling and talking workshops to help people to build that confidence in talking with their children. So there's lots and lots of resources out there to help. So just to summarize, the decision making and next steps, I want to sort of send you off feeling like, okay, now I know what I need to do, I know what I need to think about. So the first thing is remembering, if you have a partner, you may not be at the same stage and you may not be going at the same speed. So make sure that you invest time and energy in this to bring each other up to the same level so that you can go forward together as a team with confidence. If you're single, even now, you might want to start building your village. You're going to need a network around you. So you want to start thinking about who that might be, how you might bring them into your life, and support for the journey. You want to give yourself time and space to really explore your options and feelings. You may have got a sense that some of these decisions are really quite complicated and have impact on other decisions. So you don't want to rush this. This is really important. You know, what's going to be more important than the choices you're making now. Try to settle for a realistic time frame. So don't make it too long that you start panicking. I can't wait another 2 years to make this decision. But you might be able to give yourself 3 months or 6 months, even 12 months. And I would, of course, say consider either coming on a workshop or joining DC Network to get that extra support. You really want to put a lot of energy. It's such an important topic. You can always contact us, you can phone us or email us, talk to friends and family if you've got close friends and family that you trust, do your research. I would recommend counselling, obviously talking to your partner, and really make this an opportunity for you to flush out the difficult questions and feelings. So if you're having doubts, if you've got questions, make sure that you can voice them somewhere, because this is the time to have that conversation. So also take care of yourself. You know, it's not easy. You're making these important decisions and you're probably feeling overwhelmed and under a lot of pressure, possibly also very hormonally topsy-turvy if you're having IVF or any other kind of medical treatment at the same time. So be kind to yourself. It's not an easy process. But remember also, you know, what decision is going to be more important than this? So give it some time, give it some effort. And remember that you will make a decision. That time will come, and it doesn't need to be perfect. Not all the elements need to be perfect. It just needs to be good enough that you can get to a point where you feel really decided that this is the right way forward. I think we had some posters made, and I just think they summarise our families perfectly. These are real people, real members with their children. So not my egg, but absolutely my daughter, and not my sperm, but absolutely my son. And I think that sums up where donor conception families feel. So very quick summary for the end. Is donor conception right for you? So it is an individual and a couple question. You will probably need time to grieve what can't be before being able to answer the question, is it right for you? You might need to think about how you feel about genetics and genetic connection. You might need to think about how you feel about difference. And you might want to reflect on what it's going to feel like to have a donor involved in the creation or the expansion of this family. I think it can be summarized in some ways by saying, you know, is what's important here? Do you want to be a parent, or are you trying to create a mini you, a mini me? And how are you going to feel telling this story to your child? Is this going to feel like a story you can be proud of and that they can be proud of? And to finish off, Sam is a donor-conceived young man. I think he expressed it very nicely. Confident parents lead to confident children would be something that we've noticed in the network. So I think when you've done all your thinking, you've analysed everything, ultimately you've just thought, I'm just going to go with this option, embrace that final decision, relax, move forward, and follow Sam's advice. He said to us once, this is a few years ago now, people seem to get so stressed about it all. I think they should just chill out more. If they're anxious to do the right thing, they probably will do the right thing. So I think the fact that you're here, you're watching this webinar, you're investing time and effort into understanding the issue, you're anxious to do the right thing, and that probably means you will do the right thing. Thank you. Gone slightly over my half an hour, but I did not too badly, hopefully.
No problem, Nina. It was a great presentation. Thank you a lot for that, and the support, which was almost tangible. Thank you one more time. And now I think that we are ready to get the questions, right?
Great, yeah.
Okay, so how do you select a donor? We have chosen a clinic and been offered a donor, but we don't know if they are right for us or not. We don't feel any strong connection to their profile. Are we being superficial?
Okay, so no, you're not being superficial. Definitely not. I think the selection of a donor is really, really personal. So what suits one person will not suit another. So there isn't a right and a wrong as a general rule, but there will be a right and a wrong for you. So you need to. It's very difficult to get the balance right. I think people need to feel comfortable with the person that they're bringing into their life in this way. And for some people, like I said, I said earlier, you know, that will mean having very little information. They want the clinic to choose. And for other people, there'll be certain criteria in the profile of the donor that make them feel positive about this person. You know, you have to remember that it's not a real person. In the sense that the profile you're getting is just a profile. You don't really know this person, but you have to feel a connection to them. You have to feel that they're going to be the right choice. So I think if you're not sure, you need to think about why that is. And so, I'll give an example. Sometimes people can get very hung up on education level, or on height, for example. Sometimes even colouring. So they particularly want a blue-eyed donor. And it's up to the individual, to be up to you to work out whether, just how much weight to place on that connection. So let's say you're looking for somebody who has a certain education level because you do. So that might be really important, and you need to work out if that's still true. But you also have to think, well, if you had this child and then they ended up having really bad dyslexia, so they were never going to be able to achieve the educational level that you'd hope for them, but they're going to have a wonderful life, they're going to be really happy, they're going to, you know, you're going to love being parents, you're going to really enjoy raising them and helping them through the difficulties of having really bad dyslexia that will be quite challenging at school maybe. So then does it matter whether they end up, is that really what you're looking for in taking on this parental role? Another example, so we had a lesbian couple who spoke at one of our conferences a few years ago, and they were talking about how they really had no criteria for their donor. They just wanted the donor to have brown eyes, because the whole family, the two women had brown eyes, both their families had brown eyes, and they just thought, we need a brown-eyed donor to fit with our family. And that is a really understandable and quite perfectly fine way to choose a donor. So they did. And you can probably guess the colour of the child's eyes when he was born, but it was not brown. He came out with the brightest blue eyes you could ever imagine, and even though the donor had brown eyes. So and he must be in his late teens now, but you know, do they not feel happy because he doesn't have brown eyes? Of course not. And in fact, they love the fact that he has blue eyes and he looks amazing, and he's the blue-eyed boy. So it's, I'm not going to be helpful because I'm not going to tell you the answer whether this donor is right for you or not, but you need to unpick what is it about this person that doesn't feel right, and is it really true that this person isn't right, or is it something that you're layering another level on? You're making assumptions about what kind of child you're going to get based on some arbitrary criteria. And that's not to say that you should just accept a donor that's offered to you, because like I said, it's important that you feel positively about this person. You might, if I haven't quite answered the question, maybe I'm guessing, Sophie, that they can post another question, can they?
Yeah, of course.
So if I haven't quite answered that question, then post another one and I'll try and pick it up later on.
Yeah. The next question then, it will be this one. How do you select a clinic, UK versus abroad, guarantees versus success rates? There are so many. How do you navigate it?
Great question again, and really difficult. So okay, so if I'll treat those as two separate bits. So UK versus abroad. I think it's important to look at the legal differences. So in the UK, the donor is going to be identifiable at 18. When the child reaches 18, they will have the right to information about the donor, information about half siblings, and contact possibly. If you're going abroad, chances are, I don't know where you're going abroad, but most European countries, the donor will be unidentifiable. So there'll be no logged and registered information that you can access. Like I said, with DNA testing sites, it's becoming less clear whether that will actually prevent people from finding the information or not. But there'd be no sort of clear process of how a child would access that information about their donor or half siblings. The other differences are, in the UK there is a 10 family limit. So any donor donating to a clinic will only be able to create a maximum of 10 families. So that's not 10 children, because each family might have more than one child, but it's an absolute maximum of 10 families. So you're probably looking at a maximum of maybe 15 children who your child would be half sibling to. Now, when you're going abroad, there aren't the same restrictions, and with egg donation, it's unlikely that there would be so many other half siblings, but with sperm donation, there certainly could be, and that can be a consideration for some people. Having said that, obviously there are other considerations that you need to think about. It can be cheaper going abroad. Sometimes it can be quicker. So you can access donors and access treatment more quickly. So it depends a little bit on your situation and how much time you feel you have and where you are on the journey. But I would just say that in this decision making, you want to be thinking about what a potential child might need from you. And if you're going to go abroad, that's fine, but make sure you feel comfortable with that and feel able to answer a question that might come up for your child. So they may say, you know, I'd quite like to meet my donor. Is that possible? And the answer might not be no, because it depends on how how the DNA testing sites work, and whether there might be other routes apart from through a clinic registration route that you could find this person, but it may make it more difficult. And of course, the donor won't be expecting it because they're not being counselled to expect that there would be any kind of contact. So it's things like that, and that can be managed absolutely fine. You know, I would say probably 50% of our membership have anonymous donors, and even, you know, all of the older children that we have in the network were conceived before the change in the law in the UK anyway. So we've got a lot of experience of managing that, and it's really down to the confidence of the parents, how they can hold that story together and hold everything. But like I said, it can be that cost, or that access to donors means that you feel you've got to go abroad. Success rates, that's another matter. So I would be really, really suspicious of success rates, particularly in the clinics abroad. The clinics in the UK are monitored by the HFEA, so they have to present their information in a like-for-like way, and so they're quite restricted in how they can present the information. So some of the, you know, you have to be quite an active, assertive consumer or customer, but some of the foreign clinics will exclude data from their statistics that doesn't sort of boost their percentages. Sometimes they will talk about pregnancy, not live birth, and of course there will still be miscarriages and other you know, unfortunate situations that mean that a pregnancy doesn't translate into a live birth, and so that can look like it's a much higher success rate. So you want to make sure we're talking about births, not just pregnancies. And like I said, you know, that there isn't a body that's having oversight over these clinics, so they're sort of you're having to go on trust. So I think if a success rate looks too good to be true, it possibly is, and you certainly could ask them, well, you know, how come you're getting these great statistics? There are you know, there are other things. But one other thing about the UK versus abroad, different clinics abroad will have different protocols to the UK. And so, for example, there's been a big move in the UK to only put one embryo back at a time. And this is for the health and well-being of the mum, health and well-being of the baby, but it doesn't actually limit success rate. So you know, the statistics show that if you put one embryo back, you're just as likely to get a successful live birth or baby at the end as if you put two or more. But a lot of the European countries are still putting back lots of embryos, and that is something to just be a bit wary of, because there are health implications for both the pregnant woman and for the multiple births. So that's another reason. It's just you know, you've answered, you've said it at the end. Really, there are so many, and it is incredibly difficult to navigate it all. I probably haven't answered very helpfully, because I think what you'd like me to do is to say, right, there's four that we'd recommend, and you just go to them and choose between them. But it just doesn't work like that. And I can't even say that one clinic is better than another, because we hear from people, you know, we'll be on the phone to somebody, they'll say, oh, I had treatment at such and such clinic, it was amazing. And then literally the next day someone will phone up and say, oh, you know, I had treatment at that clinic and it was awful. So it's very much a personal decision. But yeah, sorry.
Yes, and
long
thank you.
answer.
Yeah, thank you for the advices. It was great. I think that this is very helpful, even though you don't have like roadmap, you know, with all the clinics. We all understand that. Now I think that we will take two questions at once, but they will be very close related. It will be about family building. The first one, for me, using a donor isn't an issue. The worry is how we will cope with that, with no parents and no family nearby as parents.
Yeah. Okay, well, I can't really answer it, but because I don't know how you'll cope, and it is hard work, obviously, being a parent. But all I'll say is that you know, people do it, and I think the fact that you recognise that it's going to be a challenge is a good start, because what it means is it's not going to catch you out where you're suddenly going to find yourself further down the line thinking, oh my goodness, we are not coping. It is a hard job. and it's easier if you build a network around you. So, you know, you can start that now. And certainly once you've if you're successful and you have a baby, then there will be lots and lots of opportunities to get to know other people with children and babies of a similar age. And I would just say, do everything you can to network and build those connections. Scatter yourself wide, so don't be too picky at the start, and then as you connect with lots of people, then sift through and choose the ones that you really feel you've got a good connection with, and try to invest in those friendships so that they become, okay, that's not quite the same as family, but it's close enough. It's the sort of people that you can lean on a little bit and rely on a little bit, and you obviously need to offer that in return. But you know, having children is a great networking opportunity, because everybody wants to connect, everybody wants their child to meet other children. They all need, you know, occasional babysitting or help with a bit of childcare, or just, you know, somewhere to go and complain about the stresses and strains of family life or whatever. So you can offer some of that and you can get some in return, but just start early and work at it, invest in building those relationships. You can't create family out of nothing, but you can create friends and make them as close as to family as you can.
Yes, and thank you for the answer. And then the next one, which is also about the family. I had my last frozen embryo transfer 2 weeks ago, and it failed. It was my last embryo. I am 43. My consultant informed me yesterday that donor egg would be the best option. My mom was with me, and he asked her how she felt. She said she totally disagrees with the whole idea, as it won't have anything to do with me. I now feel unsettled about how she feels. I tried to explain that I would be nurturing the baby in me, and so I will feel connected. How do you manage situation when family members do not agree with decisions?
That's a very good question, and a very, very challenging situation. We have got people in that sort of situation, and certainly people who've been through that situation and come out the other side. So I think the first thing to say is that it's early days. Often people will feel, you may yourself have felt when you considered it, oh, I'm not sure, is this okay? And maybe you didn't, maybe immediately you thought, oh, this will be absolutely fine, and let's go for it. But often people have a pause and they think, is this okay? Do people do this? Is egg donation and a normal thing, that a normal way to have a family? And so different people will take different amounts of time to think through that and really think, what does it mean, and is it okay, and how do I feel about it all? So it may be that your mum is at that early stage of just thinking, this is a bit odd, I don't know anyone else who's done it, it doesn't feel quite right, but that doesn't mean that she's going to feel like that forever. Very often in a family, once a baby arrives, nobody cares how that baby arrived, they just love the baby. But of course, that may not happen, I can't guarantee it. So I think with these situations, I think it's a bit like any situation where you have a dilemma, where you want to do something and someone else close to you doesn't agree or doesn't approve or thinks it's not the right decision for you. So in those situations, whatever the question is, whether it's having a baby this way, or moving house, or choosing a partner, whatever big decision it might be, ultimately it's your decision, it's your choice, and it's your life. So you're going to have to make that decision for yourself, and then accept the fact that your mum may not ever quite agree with it. But she may also change her feelings as the baby arrives and as a child grows into a person. We certainly have got experience of families where originally parents were quite uncomfortable with the idea, and that actually that changed once the children arrived, and it changed dramatically as the children grew up and became these lovely individuals that they could connect to. Because at the moment, your mum hasn't got a person to connect to, hasn't got a child to connect to. So you can't guarantee it, but it definitely has happened. But ultimately, the bottom line is it's about you. This is your life. You want to have a baby, then this may be the only way that you're going to manage that. But not easy.
Thank you. And I think that we will then take the next question, which is very broad, but from the perspective of your donor conception network and your experiences. Does anyone ever experience bonding issues or have any regrets about going ahead with donor conception?
Yes, people definitely experience bonding issues. The difficulty is knowing whether it is definitely the donor conception part of the story that is at the heart of the problem, or whether it's just bonding can be difficult even when you're genetically connected to the child. You know, it's a problem for many women for lots of different reasons, and it can be associated with postnatal depression, which may have nothing to do with the donor conception. But it you know it's obviously it's a concern, and it can happen. Again, I think like with most issues, it's something that if it comes, then you deal with it as it's there, and you acknowledge it and get help. And there are I certainly the situations I can think of where bonding was an issue, that those people got through it with help and all came out the other side, and it was fine. And like I said, it can happen in any family. So I think it helps if you've invested the time before you get pregnant in really thinking through your fears and anxieties. Even voicing a question like that is helpful, because it gets it out, and it means that you're thinking about these things, which I think is preventative. I think it helps to minimize the chance of that happening. But it also means that if you do have bonding issues, you've already raised it. It's already a topic that's in your head and in your partner's head, and so therefore it can be addressed. It's not some sort of shameful thing that you don't just talk about because you didn't expect it. Regrets about going ahead with donor conception, that's a really tough one to that's a really tough one to answer. I think I would perhaps frame it slightly differently, and I think parents can sometimes look back at decisions that they've made and think that they maybe could have made a different decision, and that would have been better for the family. But I also think that is true of all families. I think it is rare to find parents who will sit there with their adult children and say, I did this all perfectly. And for the children to say, absolutely, yes, you did it all perfectly, mum, you did it all perfectly, dad. Normally there are things, the decisions that we make on behalf of our children, that they are not necessarily happy with. And like I said, sometimes we're not happy with them either. So it is just part of parenting to make lots of mistakes and to do a bit of learning on the job, I think. So I'm not going to answer that one directly about specifically around donor conception, but I think generally parents make mistakes and get on with it. So.
And thank you, Nina, for this answer as well. We will stay with doubts and fears. We use the local clinic as a two-mommy couple, and I keep meeting people, especially in twin groups, who use the same clinic. I wonder what I would do if I realized that someone I just met had used the same donor. Would I establish contact between the two families or not?
Okay. So yes, that is a situation that does come up. Again, like with most things, there isn't a right and a wrong here. And it's a really good thing that you're thinking about this ahead of time, because it sounds like it is a possible thing that could come up for you. it probably depends a little bit on if you discovered the chance was high with another family, how you felt about that other family, and perhaps how they felt about you. You know, whether you had a sense that you could forge some sort of relationship that would be helpful and constructive for the families. Where it's happened in the network, but where there's sort of been an accidental match or sense of a match, parents have normally, in our experience, have taken it very slowly, and they've led the conversation to start with. It does depend a little on how old the children are as well. But I think once you know something, you can't unknow it. So it is a difficult situation to be in. You can't just pretend that you don't have suspicions and perhaps even concrete definitive evidence that this is someone who's used the same donor as you. So you have to be honest. It has to be faced. But I think that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to forge ahead with a hugely intimate, close relationship with this other family. You're still two separate families. The fact that you share a donor doesn't necessarily have to mean anything. So you can lead it very, very slowly and gently and see how it feels. I mean, it can work fantastically. And we know of families who've connected through a mutual donor by accident. And then those families have really connected well. The children get on enormously well. The parents get on enormously well. And it's just been a really successful, unexpected discovery for everybody concerned. But you can't guarantee that. So I think I would just say, go very slowly, be cautious, don't blur the boundaries too quickly, and feel your way. It's harder to step back than it is, you know, once you've gone too far in. Much harder to step back, and you don't know what this other family what their expectations might be or hopes might be. So just go slow.
Thank you for sharing your answer and advice as well. And we will take a look for the next question. Could you please explain, as you are based in the UK, how the non-anonymity thing works in the UK, as there are many patients going abroad because of that? Looking for anonymous donor, what would you tell these UK patients thinking about going abroad because of the donor's anonymity to encourage them to stay in the UK?
I mean, I think ultimately I would start by saying that it's their decision, it's their journey, it's their family. So they need to make the decision and make that the choice that feels right for them. Then, if I'm going to talk about the positives of staying in the UK versus going abroad, yeah, I mean, I think it would be that their child may feel differently to them. So, you know, as a parent, you might think it's irrelevant to me who the donor is, and I'm not interested in them, and I don't really want them anywhere in my life, and that's fine, fair enough. But it may be that you have a child who feels differently, and so it can be useful to keep the door open. So that if a child says that they'd like something, like they'd like to find out more about the donor, or they'd like to know how many half siblings they have, or and might want to meet or have contact with those half siblings, that you have that option. I sometimes wonder whether the fact that the law changed in the UK means that those children actually won't be that interested because they can, they won't want to, and it'll be children who can't, who'll be very keen to. We'll see when of course the children haven't turned 18 yet. They won't turn 18 till 2023. But I think there are some other reasons for staying in the UK. So I think the family limit is a helpful one. It can be difficult for children young people to consider the fact they might have 50 half siblings and they don't know where they are, or more. And so that can be a positive for a lot of people. I think that the having a regulator, just checking on the clinics, making sure that what they say they're doing is ethical and is they're following good practice, etc. Not to say that the clinics abroad aren't. It's just that here you've got that umbrella of organisation just checking on things, so there is some security. And so there are maybe other reasons for staying in the UK apart from just the lack of anonymity. And all I'd end with as well is the whole landscape is shifting thanks to DNA testing. So if people are actively going abroad specifically because they want an anonymous donor, then I would be quite cautious about that. I hope clinics are not promoting that, because I don't think they can guarantee it anymore. The chance of a child who growing up, and if what we're seeing today is true, the sort of discoveries that are being made, then I imagine that in 10 years time, 20 years time, it will be impossible for a donor to stay anonymous, thanks to matching, genetic families being matched all the time on these sites like 2023 and 23andMe and Ancestry UK and the other ones. So I would just say, be cautious.
Thank you for the advice and the answer, of course. We will then take the next question, which is this one. My husband and I have decided to pursue egg donation. We have counseling and feel positive about our choice. However, we are unsure whether we should tell my mom, in fear that she will not support our decision. We also have a large extended family that loves to gossip, and we are concerned about their reaction. We are considering keeping it from my mom and the family, but we want to be open with our child. Do you see any way this can work? Not revealing to family, but being open with our child.
Yes and no. I think, first of all, I would just say that there's no rush. So, even with telling a child, and we tend to recommend that you start talking with a child under the age of 5, really, because then they have no idea what you're talking about, frankly. So they kind of absorb it on one level, but they don't really get it, and that's the whole point. So they will absorb this story, they will make sense of it, will sift through, and then at the point when they do understand it a bit more, when they get to maybe aged 8 or 9 or 10, that by then it's already in them, it's already part of who they are. It's not a big shock, it's not a big reveal, and so they've integrated it into their identity, and then just they build on that to make sense of it, to mean more. Okay, what does that mean, and what are the implications, etc., as they grow up. So there isn't a rush that if you're going to tell your child, you have to do it in the first 2 years of after they're born. So it gives you a little bit of time to build your own confidence and think, well, who cares if who cares if people don't approve or don't agree with your choices? That's their business, and if they're not going to be really hostile, so really seriously having a negative reaction to this, so seriously negative, then it's like, so they may not be hugely supportive, but as long as they're able to be respectful, you may decide, okay, we'll go for it, because it is difficult. If you're open with a young child, it is difficult to stop them potentially sharing it with other people. Some children will never speak about it. They maybe mention it occasionally at home, but they're just not that interested. Other children are really interested, and they might want to even they may feel very proud and excited about it, and want to share it, and that's a wonderful thing, and you sort of don't want to hold that back, if that's the kind of child you end up with, because that's a lovely sense of pride and excitement in who they are. So it is hard to guarantee that you could be open with a child, but for them not to mention it to anybody. They may not, but they may. So there is another strategy, which is you can wait until the child's a little bit older. And it's something that we might recommend if there are really serious concerns in the family, that you know that there are people who are going to be actively hostile to your child, or very negative about this choice, that you could wait until the child is a little bit older, and a child of say 7. It's not inconceivable. They know what the family's like by that point. And so you could say to them, well, it's something important that we need to share with you, and you explain a bit about their history and their origins, and say, we haven't told grandma because you know what she's like. She thinks everything's wrong, so we just thought that she doesn't need to know, and perhaps with the 7-year-old that they would understand that, and they'd know grandma and what she's like, and they'd be happy to just not talk to grandma about it. You just need to be careful that you don't end up making it sound like it's something that the child should feel embarrassed about or concerned about. And that's where the messaging, you might decide actually a better message for the child is for you to just be super proud. Who cares let them gossip, fine, let them gossip. You can be confident that you've made a good decision for you and your family. So yes, to summarize, I don't think it's possible to tell a young child and guarantee that they're not going to tell anybody else. So be cautious. You might be able to manage it with an older child, but maybe that's not the strategy. Maybe you just need to go for it.
And thank you for the great answer. Actually, you maybe answered this question as well, the second one, the next one, about telling your child in early years, but how do you explain it, right? So how to tell a child when the child is younger, and this is the main question in this one. And if you want to add anything else to this topic, we will appreciate it.
No, absolutely. I mean, so telling, it's the thing that we probably know most about in some ways. It's not easy. Mainly, though, the reason why it's not easy is because for parents, it's been such an emotional journey, and they've gone through so much heartache. They may have gone through failed attempts, spent huge amounts of money, the emotional ups and downs, the medical treatment and the invasive treatment, the hope for a baby that, is it ever going to happen? So that's a parent's journey. That's not the child's journey. So the child doesn't have that baggage. For them, it's the, potentially it's the exciting way that they were made, different way, but it's just information. So I think it is emotionally challenging for parents, but the resources that we have hopefully help with that. So I would recommend that you get a copy of our telling and talking booklet. So there's a telling and talking booklet. These are for parents to help them build confidence in how to share, when, how, why you'd want to tell. So telling and talking 0 to 7, assuming that your child is young, and then get one of the Our Story books. I went through it fairly quickly. I didn't want it to be too much of a sort of sales pitch on the things that DC Network can offer. But if you go to our website in our shop and look at the books that are available, there's a series of books for children called Our Story, and one of those will be for a family using double donation. So we have double donation for het couples, for single women, for same-sex couples. So choose the right family situation and choose the double donation booklet, and that tells the lovely story of how your child was made, and it's a positive story. It's how they came into the world. So those two resources together should give you confidence. And if you need more support, then contact us or join the network, and then you can have contact with other families, talk about how they did it, maybe come on a workshop. It is sometimes more difficult for double donation because it can feel like that there isn't a thread to hang on. There's not one bit of connection. But again, actually, we there hasn't been any proper research yet to show whether that has any bigger impact on a child. Like I said, they may be curious about who these donors are, but the fact is you're the one that is their mum doing all of the mum work. You're putting them to bed and feeding them and picking them up when they've hurt themselves and making big decisions for them, with them. So you're the mum in the family, and that's the story of how this child came to be.
And thank you for your supportive answer. And we will then take the question about your network, actually. Does Donor Conception Network have any closed or private forums for potential parents to chat to parents of donor conception children? I would have found something like this so helpful and setting during my decision to use an egg donor. And actually, one more question, which is connected also to... Do you have resources in French? So this is a question to you about Donor Conception Network.
We don't have any resources in French, I'm afraid. That's a good suggestion. We have our booklets, our telling and talking booklets have been translated into Polish and Japanese and German, and I don't think they've been translated into French though. So I will find out, but I don't think so. In terms of having a forum, now we currently don't have a forum up and running, but I am hoping we are exploring whether we can relaunch it. There were some problems with the old forum; it wasn't working properly, and so I'm really hoping to have good news on that in the next few weeks, actually. But I can't confirm right now for sure.
Yes, thank you for the answer. We will be slowly finishing, but anyway, we will take a look for the next question for now. Are there studies on grown-up children from donor conception where it shows what are most asked questions once adults?
Not formal studies. So there's an organisation in the United States called the Donor Sibling Registry, the DSR, and they did a big survey of donor-conceived adults, asking them all sorts of questions about how they felt and what was important to them. And the responses were amazing, very, very illuminating. I mean, it was sort of what we kind of knew, but it was wonderful to see it all there in a big spreadsheet of the data that they'd got back from the survey. I'm sure that information is still there. So it's not a scientific study, it's not representative. It will be self-selecting. A lot of the people in the survey were people who discovered late or found out by accident because of the generation. So obviously that, those that you have to remember that until very recently, the professional advice was not to tell, just pretend it never happened. And so that has meant that there's a kind of group of families who were being, where the children were being raised in that sort of climate. So the situation is very different now, and hopefully the message is getting through that actually you can be open and it can go very well, and although it may be difficult for parents to do it, it doesn't have to be bad news for children. So the study. So I wouldn't call it a study, but it is very interesting, and certainly, we get a lot of feedback from we have a lot of donor conceived adults in our network, and we get them to speak regularly at our conferences and other events that we run, because it's really important to hear their views. And I think I'm not quite sure what you mean exactly by what the most asked questions are once. I'm guessing you mean sort of what are they most curious about? And I think, they often are very curious about their donor or donors, and they're very curious about half siblings. They may even be very curious about the genetic family that is wider than just the donor and the half siblings. And parents can sometimes feel very threatened by that and feel like, oh gosh, they're curious because I'm not giving them enough, or they don't love me, or they don't feel safe in this family. But it's mostly just a curiosity, like, oh, how interesting it would be to meet some of these people, to know who they are. And it's not got anything to do with the quality of the parenting or their feelings about their parents or feelings about their the family that they're being raised in.
Thank you again. We are slowly running out of time, but can we take one more question, Nina?
Sure. Yeah, that's fine.
Yes, and by the way, all the questions which by any accident will be left without any answer, we will forward all the questions to Nina or to our patient coordinator team, because we have one closely related medical question. And now we will take the one more, which is about none of interest, actually. I told my sister-in-law about our choice for donor conception, and she was completely disinterested. My sister was sharp with me when I told her about our previous IVF, so I have not told her about donor conception. I've worried so much about telling my family, and getting this response has been so painful. I have no parents. Have other people experienced this disinterest, and how have they got past the pain of it?
So I'm guessing, because my first thought when you said she was completely disinterested was a positive, was like, oh, yeah, it's no big deal. But I'm guessing that what you're meaning is that you were hoping that to talk to her and share with her a little bit more deeply, and she, was cold and not wanting any conversation. I'm assuming that's the situation. Yeah, it is hard. People are complicated. Family is complicated. Siblings are complicated. Relationships with siblings can be complicated. Relationships with parents can be complicated. I think maybe find the people that you care about who will give you what you need. So maybe it's going to be close friends, maybe a partner, if share it with your partner, maybe other family members that you feel that you actually have a closer connection. And it is very difficult. Family can be very disappointing and not behave well in all sorts of situations, not donor conception necessarily. Oh, I can hear a cat. I can hear a cat meowing. Sorry.
Oh, we love cats.
So I think maybe don't force them to be something that they're not. They're doing their best, and just hope that as I said in a previous question, once a baby actually arrives, it is a different thing, and people will often connect to the baby very well and connect to a child. I'm just going to sorry, Sophie, can you hear the cat?
Yes, we can hear the cat, but we love cats. Everybody loves cats, right? So
I think it's a neighbour's cat that's come in and is getting cross with our cat, or our cat's getting cross with the neighbour's cat, because there's something not right in the sound. So apologies, everybody.
No problem.
Yes, yeah, I'm sorry. I feel like I haven't answered that question brilliantly well, but I think find the people that are going to give you that support, and try and be forgiving for the people that are not being helpful at the moment, and trust that once there is a child that hopefully they will be able to relate to that child, because they become an individual, and everybody loves babies.
Yes, thank you for explaining this as well. And actually, I have for you a lot of shout outs. Thank you for this webinar. It was extremely helpful. And Nina, Thank you so much for answering our question as honestly as you have. You have really helped us in our journey. You are amazing.
Oh,
And one more,
thank you.
thank you. Never been involved in a webinar before and found it helpful. And yes, we can continue with the comments like that. So I would like to thank you one more time for your time and for your presentation and all the support you gave us. Thank you also for everybody who was taking part in our webinar today. Actually, we are in the process of planning the next one with Donor Conception Network, which will be dedicated to single moms or decision of becoming a single mom. Actually, Nina, maybe you would like to add anything on the topic?
So no, I mean it will have some similar elements to the presentation today, but because today was so broad, you know, it was sort of all family types, all donation types, all the issues, and actually for single people, I've particularly focused on single mums because there's far more of them than single dads, but you know, there are some specific and different things that often they face, and so I thought it'd be helpful to do something sort of just for them. We'll see if anybody's interested.
Yes, I'm sure that there will be many people interested in that topic. I also would like to add that this webinar from today, it will be available on our website tomorrow. And actually, I would like to encourage you to stay tuned and to follow us to be up to date with all the information. And of course, one more time, I'd like to thank our partners who help us do what we are doing, and thank you for that. In the chat section, I also put the email address. As I mentioned before, all the questions from today which was left without no answer, we will take care of it, forward it to Nina. The one medical will be forwarded to our patient coordinators team. And I would like to thank you everybody for your time, and we will be glad to see you next week, the same place and same time next Tuesday with the next IVF webinars. Nina, thank you a lot. It was a huge pleasure to have you here. I can't wait for the next one. And thank you one more time for all your support which you gave us today.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. So, good night.
Good night.
Bye.